Olivia stood by the firelight, one hand resting gently on her stomach. She hadn't meant to tell him tonight. Not here. Not like this. But the way Damien's eyes sparkled in the soft amber glow, his laugh echoing across their penthouse like. He hadn't a single care in the world. It broke something inside her. Damien, she said quietly, interrupting his monologue about the next board merger. Her voice was steady but full of quiet weight. I need to tell you something. He paused mid-sip of his wine. You're not going to say you hate Napa, are you? He joked, smirking. She didn't smile. His expression shifted. All right, what is it? She took a breath. I'm pregnant. The word landed like a dropped glass, silent, then catastrophic. Damien blinked. Once, twice, he looked at her like she'd just confessed to a crime. You're sure? He asked, voice sharp around the edges that Olivia's brow furrowed. I took 3 tests. I saw the doctor this morning. He stepped back slightly, wine glass still in hand. But you're on the pill. I was. But things happen. I'm not blaming you. He set the glass down with too much force, the clink sharp. He paced, ran both hands through his hair. This is not ideal, Liv. Not ideal? She repeated, almost laughing. You asked me to marry you. You said you wanted a future with me. That was before this, he snapped, then closed his eyes like he regretted it instantly. Before this. Before him. This tiny flicker of life forming inside her. Did this story reach your heart? Like, share, and let us know your hometown or country. Damien turned to her, voice lower now. I've got a partnership deal closing in 3 months. Investors lined up. A scandal like this, a scandal? Olivia whispered, the air suddenly colder. I mean, press, rumors, stories. You know how these vultures operate. Her chest tightened. I'm not the press. I'm your fiancé. He was silent. Then, in the quietest voice, he said, we need to postpone the wedding. Something cracked. Postpone, she echoed. He wouldn't meet her eyes. And just like that, the man she'd built her future around, whose toothbrush sat next to hers, whose voice she memorized like a prayer, began to unravel. The next 2 days were a blur of excuses, meetings, calls I can't miss, cold dinners, colder silences. Then came the maybe we should take a little space, followed by the gut punch. I think we rushed into this. She stared at the empty ring. Box for hours. He'd left it behind on purpose. It sat on the marble counter like a dare. Then, he was gone to no fight. No goodbye, just a note from his assistant. Damien is stepping away to realign his personal priorities. He wishes you peace and privacy. The following week, an envelope arrived by courier. Inside, a typed non-disclosure agreement, a check for $300,000, and a cover letter from a law firm she'd never heard of. Her hands trembled as she read the terms. No contact with Damien, no mention of the pregnancy, no interviews, media, or publication. Sign and receive the funds. Beneath it, in ink that looked almost rushed, was a short, handwritten message. Don't contact me again. D. She stared at the paper for a long time. Then she tore it in half, then in quarters, then in so many pieces she couldn't even see his name anymore. She crumpled the check and flushed it down the toilet, watching it dissolve like the future he'd promised. The next morning, she vomited bile and blood into the sink. Grief has a taste. Metallic, bitter, unrelenting. She sat on the floor of her bathroom for hours, one hand on her belly, the other clenched into a fist. She didn't cry. Not yet, but the silence screamed. And when she finally stood up, her eyes weren't red with sorrow. They were dark with something else entirely. Resolve. The baby came during a snowstorm. Not the soft kind, either, the brutal kind that shakes the windows like fists and turns every breath outside into a fight for warmth. Olivia labored alone, barefoot on a thrift store rug, biting down on an old towel to muffle her screams. The neighbor upstairs turned up their TV. She didn't call an ambulance. Couldn't. No insurance. No hospital deposit. No partner pacing in the hallway or boiling water in a silver pot. Just her, a cracked bathroom mirror, and the tiny whimpers of a life that refused to wait. When it was over, she lay on the floor, her legs numb, her body broken, but her eyes locked on the little boy curled against her chest. Ezra, she whispered, voice trembling. Ezra. She didn't know where the name came from. Maybe it came from the silence. Maybe from something older, deeper. But once she said it, she couldn't imagine calling him anything else. The next morning, the heat in the apartment shut off, and 2 days later, the news broke. Millionaire tech tycoon breaks engagement after pregnancy scandal. She trapped him, said unnamed source close to Damien. Gold digger drama. They used an old photo. Olivia at his side in a black satin gown, laughing at something he'd whispered. They froze that image in time, but not the context. In the comment sections, strangers wrote things she couldn't unread. She looks like the type. Another one trying to cash in with a baby bump. But it's not even his. She wanted to scream, but the baby was asleep. She wanted to run, but she couldn't afford bus fare. She wanted to fight, but all she had were overdue bills, formula cans bought with spare change, and Damien's lawyers emailing cease and desists. Every time someone tweeted her name, her fridge was nearly empty. 2 eggs, half a bag of frozen peas, a bottle of breast milk in a chipped mug. On day 17, she sold her engagement ring, pawned it for less than the cost of the coffee machine Damien had gifted his executive assistant. The man who once promised her a house in the hills now wouldn't even acknowledge their child. Her mother called once. "You sure you're not doing this for attention, baby? You know how you get." She never called again. The weight of motherhood wasn't what surprised Olivia. It was the loneliness. The kind that curled under your skin like mold and made you question if maybe they were right. Maybe she was unstable, dramatic, forgettable. But every time she looked at Ezra, she remembered. They don't get to write your story. One night, she sat on the floor wrapped in a blanket, Ezra asleep beside her in a laundry basket. She stared out the cracked window at the glowing skyline, his skyline, and whispered, "You'll never be like him. Not if I have anything to do with it." The lights flickered. Her phone buzzed. Another notification, this time from a tabloid app. Damien Blake announces engagement to PR exec Chloe Ross. Below it, a staged photo. Her in white. Him in the same watch he'd worn the night he disappeared. Olivia stared at it for a long time, then deleted the app. She wouldn't look anymore. Wouldn't chase headlines or try to correct the record. She was done reacting. Instead, she picked up Ezra and held him close. "Someday," she whispered, "they'll see you and wonder how I survived this." And in the silence that followed, for the first time in weeks, she didn't feel cold. She felt fire. 3 winters had passed since Ezra's birth. Olivia no longer flinched when she saw Damien's name in headlines. Not because it didn't sting, it did, but because she'd learned to treat it like background noise. Static. Just another storm in someone else's city. She folded laundry with one hand, balancing Ezra on her hip. He was 3 now, soft curls, steady eyes, already too observant for his age. "You know how to spot a lie, baby?" she asked once, folding a towel as he built towers from juice boxes. "It comes dressed in kindness." He didn't answer, of course, but he looked at her, like he understood something without needing the words. She'd gotten her degree while working night shifts at the shelter. No handouts, no lawyers, no headlines, just effort, quiet and gritty. Olivia now worked as a social worker for a crisis program downtown. She spent her days counseling teenage girls who'd been cast out for the same reasons she had. Girls who stared at the ceiling with empty eyes and whispered, "He said he loved me." She never mentioned Damien. Not once. He'd erased her, and she had returned the favor. Until the gala. Across the city, inside a penthouse framed with glass and ego, Damien Blake leaned over a gold-rimmed whiskey glass and smiled for a camera. "Humanitarian of the Year," the journalist said as the flash went off. "That must feel validating." "It's not about me," Damien replied smoothly. "It's about using privilege for purpose." He wore purpose like a tailored suit. Clean, controlled, public. Behind him, Chloe, his polished, perfect new wife, chatted with event organizers. Her bracelet alone was worth more than Olivia's annual salary. Backstage, however, something else was happening. In the corner office 2 floors up, Damien's executive assistant, Marcus, dug through a locked cabinet. He'd been told to clean house before the press arrived. That meant shredding old agreements, purging files, and, most importantly, destroying anything that looked like a liability. He paused on one yellowed folder. Handwritten in the top corner, Olivia K. Settlement/2019, inside, a printed NDA, a scanned check that was never cashed, and a handwritten memo. Unstable. Suggest PR containment. No response unless sued. Marcus swallowed. He glanced toward the hallway, then slowly fed the folder into the shredder. It groaned like a dying machine. He hesitated on the last page. It was a photo of Olivia, pregnant, barefoot, standing on the steps of Damien's old condo, arms crossed like she already knew the war she was about to lose. He burned it separately and no ashes. No proof. At home, Olivia helped Ezra brush his teeth and tucked him into bed. The walls of their one-bedroom apartment were covered in hand-drawn pictures of suns, stick figures, and rainbows with 4 colors instead of 7. "Will Daddy come one day?" Ezra asked suddenly. Olivia's hand froze on the blanket. She'd never told him. Never said the word. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" He shrugged. "Someone at preschool said everyone has a daddy. Is mine lost?" "Hey." Pause. She kissed his forehead. "No," she said softly. "He's not lost. Just hiding." Ezra blinked slowly. "Will he stop hiding?" "I don't know, baby. But even if he doesn't, we're not missing anything." She turned off the light before he could see her face tighten. Back at Damien's gala, guests sipped wine beneath crystal chandeliers while a slideshow of his impact work played silently. Behind him, donations to women's shelters, clean water in villages he'd never visited, schools built in his name. Every frame felt like a dare that he stood at the podium, smiling as he accepted the award. Cameras clicked. Chloe beamed. "We all have chapters we'd rather not reread," he said into the microphone. "But I believe in turning the page." Applause, applause. But in the dark corner of the room, someone else clapped. Once, slowly, Marcus, his face unreadable. He said nothing. But in his pocket was a flash drive that a copy of everything he shredded. And in the shadows of the empire Damien had built, the past stirred, just enough to whisper. Damien Blake had perfected the smile of a man who'd already won. The charity gala was his stage. Crystal chandeliers, glass walls, jazz humming in the background, and cameras catching him from all the right angles. Every step he took was smooth, tailored, choreographed. Even the way he held Chloe's hand seemed scripted. "Mr. Blake, over here. Smile for Forbes, please." He posed with the ease of a man used to applause. Tonight's event, in honor of children's literacy programs, was hosted at the Valencia Hotel ballroom, sleek, gold-trimmed, and exactly the kind of place Damien used to call aspirational. Now it was just another Thursday. Chloe, radiant in a champagne silk gown, leaned toward him with a smile. "You're working the room," she whispered. "I own the room," he replied. But then, he saw her, near the far wall, past the donors, and the clinking glasses and the waiters with sparkling cider trays. She was standing beside the dessert table. Olivia. His breath caught, but he recovered too quickly. Years of media training. Still, he turned slightly, instinctively moving Chloe to block his view, but not fast enough. Her eyes met his, and she didn't flinch. If anything, she knew. She wore a deep green dress, not expensive, but precise. Her hair was swept back. There was no ring on her hand, but there was a boy standing beside her, small and serious, holding tightly to her fingers. Damien's heart thudded against his ribs. The boy's curls, the shape of his eyes. That it was like staring at a reflection he'd never asked for. That he looked away. "Are you okay?" Chloe asked, her smile faltering. "I'm fine," Damien said too fast. "Just hot in here." Chloe looked around. "Do you know someone here?" He smiled tightly. "Just old ghosts." But whispers were already blooming like smoke. "Is that Olivia Kessler? Wait, the one from the scandal? That boy? He looks just like..." I thought she disappeared. And in the center of it all, Olivia didn't shrink. She moved with calm. Ezra, because Damien knew it had to be him, leaned into her dress, resting his cheek against her thigh. She bent down and whispered something in his ear, then smiled. Warm. Real. It punched through Damien like a nail through porcelain. Chloe followed his line of sight this time. "Who is she?" He hesitated. "She's no one," he said, but Chloe didn't believe him. Not entirely. Olivia had debated coming for hours. The invitation had arrived in the mail with her name misspelled. Still, something about it felt like an invitation not to the event, but to the reckoning. Ezra was wearing his only suit jacket, a little big in the shoulders. "You look like a president," she told him. He grinned. Now, as she stood in the room she'd once been banned from, by silence, by shame, she didn't feel like a guest. She felt like a storm that had been waiting that a server offered her champagne. She declined. You clean up well? A voice said. She turned. Marcus. Damien's assistant. Still sharp-suited, still shadow-faced. I see you still run errands for the devil. Olivia said calmly. He almost smiled. Not for much longer. She blinked. That's so. He handed her a folded paper. You didn't get this from me. She opened it. A financial ledger. Her name. A scan note marked threat level, moderate. Damien's scribble. If she resurfaces, neutralize softly. No press. No money. Her hands curled into fists. Marcus stepped closer. He's scared. That's why he looks like he saw a ghost. I'm not a ghost, Olivia whispered. I'm the consequence. Meanwhile, Damien made the rounds. Smiles, handshakes, speeches, but every few minutes, he glanced back. She was still there. That boy was still there. Ezra had picked up a cookie from the tray. He was talking to a donor's daughter, smiling politely. Damien watched as the boy handed the cookie to the girl first. That was Olivia in him. But the jawline? The eyes? That was Blake blood. Damien, Chloe whispered at his side, voice suddenly low and sharp. Tell me who she is. Now. His mask cracked. She's someone I used to know. A long time ago. Used to know, Chloe repeated. Slowly. And the child? He didn't answer, didn't need to. And in that moment, something shifted in Chloe's expression. Not anger. Understanding. She looked at Olivia, then back at Damien. You buried it. Damien said nothing. I should have known, Chloe whispered. I always wondered why your hands shook when the press asked about family. Olivia knew when she had their attention. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't approach Damien. She didn't make a scene. Instead, as the spotlight turned toward the main stage, she leaned down to Ezra. You ready, baby? She whispered. He nodded. Can we get dessert on the way home? She smiled. Only if you dance with me first. And as the music swelled, Olivia took her son's hand. And together they stepped onto the dance floor. Just mother and child. Under soft lights. Spinning, slowly. In a world that once tried to destroy them, Damien stood frozen. Cameras still on him. But for the first time in years, he didn't know how to smile. He just watched as the woman he'd discarded came back into the light and didn't look away. The photo was blurry, taken from across the gala floor, but it did its job. Damien Blake, eyes wide, jaw locked, staring across the ballroom at a woman with a small child. Her back straight, her hand in the boy's. His eyes, Blake eyes, the internet didn't need confirmation. It devoured speculation. Who is the mystery woman at Damien Blake's gala? Ex-fiancée resurfaces, and she's not alone. The boy who looks like a billionaire. By Monday morning, Olivia's inbox was overflowing. She ignored most of it. PR firms, morning shows, exclusive deals, but one subject line stopped her cold. Urgent. Legal inquiry from Mitchell and Crane. She clicked. It wasn't Damien's team. It was a reporter. Ms. Kessler, I'm working on a piece that connects your 2019 engagement to Damien Blake with your appearance at last week's charity event. Given the resemblance between your son and Mr. Blake, I'd like to confirm if he is the father. She closed the laptop, breathed, then opened her drawer and took out the business card. Adira Klein, attorney at law, family and civil litigation. They'd met 6 months ago during a domestic violence shelter fundraiser. Adira had been warm, careful, and blunt in all the ways Olivia respected. She called. I need to make this official, Olivia said. I want a DNA test. Public. On record. There was a pause. Are you sure? Adira asked. Once we file, there's no putting it back in the box. I'm not trying to hurt him, Olivia said. I'm trying to free my son from his shadow. That night, Damien's office received the legal notice, petition for paternity and child support. Across town, Damien stared at the document like it was written in fire. This is insane, he muttered, pacing his office. She's trying to shake me down. Marcus, uncomfortably still in the corner, didn't answer. She wants attention. She never cashed the check. Marcus interrupted quietly. Damien froze. What? The hush money. The settlement. She never took it. That file you told me to destroy? I copied it. Just in case. Damien turned slowly. You copied what? I was protecting the company, Marcus said. From you. Damien's jaw clenched. You're fired. No, I'm not, Marcus replied calmly. Because if I go, so does every copy of that file, including the one with your handwritten notes. For a second, silence ruled. Then Damien sat down, slowly, like gravity had finally caught up. Call the lawyers, he said. Adira stood next to Olivia outside the courthouse. A press wall had formed already, cameras, boom mics, reporters, circling like sharks who smelled vulnerability. But Olivia was calm, no makeup, no glam. A dark coat and Ezra's hand in hers. The boy clung to her, confused by the chaos. But Olivia knelt and whispered, "You're okay. They're just loud. We don't have to speak. Just walk." As they entered the building, flashbulbs exploded. Click. A mother. Click. A son. Click. A future that wouldn't hide anymore. 2 weeks later, the DNA test was administered in private. 0.3 swabs, 0.1 cold room, 0.0 words exchanged. Damien avoided eye contact. Olivia didn't offer any. She kept her focus on Ezra, who was playing with a small rubber dinosaur in his coat pocket. "You said this would tickle," he whispered. "It will," she said softly. "And then it'll be done." He looked up at her. "Then can we get pancakes?" She smiled. "Absolutely." The results came back 4 days later, delivered in a sealed envelope. Adira opened it first. Her eyes scanned the text, then slowly lifted to meet Olivia's. 99.97%, she said. "He's the father." No shock, no tears, just breath. Olivia took the paper, folded it, slipped it in her purse. "You want to go public?" Adira asked. Olivia shook her head. "No, let the court speak." But the court didn't get there first. TMZ did. Then the Times, the Journal, The View. DNA confirms. Tech mobile fathered child with ex-fiancée, abandoned during pregnancy. Blake blood, the scandal Damien can't bury. Every time she turned on the TV, his face was there, gutted, clipped into denials, squirming in interviews. "I was unaware of the pregnancy," he said in one. "Had I known, I would have done the right thing." Lies. She still had the texts, the NDA, the burned voicemail he thought she deleted. But she said nothing. She didn't need to. Public opinion did the rest. Social media turned. Protect Olivia. Justice for Ezra. Money can't erase motherhood. Late one night, Chloe showed up outside Olivia's apartment. She wasn't angry, just exhausted. "I didn't come to fight," she said. Olivia opened the door a fraction. "Then why?" Chloe held up a manila folder. Inside, Damien's private emails, communications with PR firms, draft statements, manipulations, deletions. "I didn't know what he did to you," Chloe said. "But I do now. And I'm sorry I stood beside him while he tried to erase you." Olivia took the folder. She didn't say thank you. She didn't need to. She simply nodded. A gesture of quiet war between women, one surviving, one waking up. Ezra didn't understand the headlines, but he did understand something important had changed. "You're not hiding anymore," he said at breakfast. Olivia looked at him. "No," she replied softly. "We're not." And for the first time in 3 years, the world wasn't whispering behind her back. The IT was listening. The courtroom smelled of cold marble, coffee, and nerves. Olivia sat at the front, hands folded in her lap, back straight. She wore a black blouse, nothing flashy, no earrings, no makeup, just clarity. She had learned, over the years, how to survive under fluorescent lights and judgmental eyes. This was different. This was war. Damien sat across from her at the defense table in a charcoal suit. Every inch the CEO, clean-shaven, composed, aloof. But his jaw flexed every few minutes. He hadn't looked at her since entering the room. Olivia didn't need him to. She wasn't here for his acknowledgement. She was here for the record, Ezra's record. The judge entered. The bailiff called the room to order, and the trial began. Adira Klein stood first. She adjusted her glasses, calm and deliberate. "Your Honor," she began, "we're here not to punish Mr. Blake, but to protect a child's legal right to be acknowledged by his father. That's all Ms. Kessler ever wanted, recognition. But what she received was silence, legal threats, and calculated abandonment." Damien's lawyer, a sleek, Ivy League fox named Jennings, countered with his opening. "This is a case of regret," Jennings said smoothly. "A woman angry that her engagement ended, now using a child as leverage for vengeance and wealth. We intend to prove that Ms. Kessler has a history of instability and manipulation." Olivia didn't move. She'd expected this. She just didn't know how loud it would be. Her name was called. Miss Kessler, please take the stand. She stood, walked forward, and raised her hand, swore to tell the truth. Then Saturday Adira approached. Gently. Olivia, she began. Can you tell the court how your relationship with Mr. Blake ended? Olivia looked ahead. I told him I was pregnant. He said it wasn't the right time. Then he left. 2 days later, I received a non-disclosure agreement, a check for $300,000, and a handwritten note that said, "Don't contact me again." Did you accept the money? No, why not? Olivia swallowed. Because my child isn't. A secret to be paid off. Adira nodded. What followed? I gave birth alone. No insurance. No support. I raised Ezra without his father, under constant pressure from his legal team. I never spoke to the press. Never tried to humiliate Damien. But when Ezra turned 3 and began asking questions, I realized I couldn't let him grow up erased. There was a pause, silence in the courtroom. Even the clicking of pens stopped. Adira stepped back. Thank you, Olivia. Then Jennings stood, and everything shifted that he moved like a predator with a law degree. Ms. Kessler, he began. You claim you didn't accept the settlement money out of principle. But at that time, you were unemployed, correct? Yes. And had no formal housing. I was staying in a small apartment. Some might call it unfit for a child. Olivia blinked. We had heat. Food. I was present. That's more than Ezra's father gave. Jennings didn't flinch. You also suffered postpartum depression, did you not? I did. Were you ever hospitalized? No. Did you ever express suicidal ideation? Adira objected. Irrelevant. Sustained, the judge said. Move on, Mr. Jennings. But the damage had landed. Chloe watched from the back bench. She hadn't told Damien she was coming. She just needed to see. Needed to know. And with each word Olivia spoke, each cold deflection Jennings delivered, Chloe's stomach turned. Damien had told her Olivia vanished. Had ghosted him with wild accusations. That he wanted to be involved, but was advised against it for mental health reasons. Now, Chloe could see what Olivia really was. Not unhinged. Just unwanted. On the stand, Olivia held her ground. Jennings pulled up an old blog post she'd written in college. About women reclaiming rage. About burning down systems that silenced them. That he read it aloud like it was a manifesto. So, he said, you believe in vengeance? I believe in fire. Olivia said evenly. When you've spent your life freezing. A murmur ran through the room. Jennings closed the file. No further questions. Olivia stepped down. She sat beside Adira. Her hands were cold, but her spine? Steel. Later that afternoon, Damien was called. He took the stand with the confidence of a man used to owning rooms. Adira approached slowly. Mr. Blake, she began. Do you deny that Ezra is your son? No. Do you deny knowing Olivia was pregnant when you ended the engagement? He hesitated. I didn't know for sure. She told you. She said it. But we hadn't discussed keeping the child. We hadn't agreed, so your response was to cut contact and send legal threats. I responded in the way my advisors told me to. Adira tilted her head. You outsourced fatherhood to your legal team? Objection. Sustained. She smiled slightly. Mr. Blake, are you involved in your son's life now? No. Have you provided any financial support? No. Have you ever met him? No. Thank you. She turned to sit, but paused. Oh, and just to clarify, you stated under oath that Olivia never tried to involve you after Ezra's birth? Yes. Adira nodded, then projected an email onto the courtroom screen that it was from Olivia. He has your eyes. You don't have to be a father, but at least be a witness to your own blood. No reply. Gasps echoed. Chloe covered her mouth. Adira let the silence sit. Then, calmly, no further questions. That night, Olivia sat on the floor of her apartment, Ezra asleep beside her, his fingers curled into her shirt. She stared at the ceiling. Tears she didn't let fall in court now slipping silently. Not from pain, but from release. Because truth, once spoken aloud, can't be undone. And for the first time, the courtroom hadn't broken her. It had burned clean. The courtroom felt colder. Today, not because of the weather, but because of what Olivia knew was coming. The cross. The part of the trial where Damien's lawyers would try to dismember her. Carefully, publicly, and without breaking the law. Just bend it enough to make her look like a woman no child should belong to. She smoothed the front of her blouse with trembling hands. But her back was straight. Her jaw set. Ezra was at school. He didn't need to see this part that he only needed to see the outcome, the truth. The judge called for the next session. She stood, walked, swore to tell the truth again, then sat down, facing a courtroom now holding its collective breath. Damien wouldn't look at her, but Chloe was there again, in the back row, hands clasped, eyes sharp, lips pressed tight like she was bracing for an earthquake she already felt in her bones. Jennings rose slowly. His expression was almost warm. Almost. Ms. Kessler, he began. You've testified that you've always had your son's best interests at heart. Is that correct? Yes. And yet, you waited over 3 years to legally pursue paternity. What? Olivia kept her voice even. I wasn't waiting. I was surviving. Jennings nodded thoughtfully, then turned to the jury. Let's unpack that. You've told us you struggled financially. No formal job, government assistance at times, correct? Yes. So wouldn't it have made sense to file immediately? Seek child support. I didn't want Damien's money, she said calmly. I wanted my son to have peace. Jennings tilted his head. Peace. Interesting. Is that what you call raising a child alone in a one-bedroom apartment with no central heat? Adira rose. Objection, sustained, the judge said. Rephrase, Mr. Jennings. Of course. He adjusted his cufflink. Would you say your living situation was modest? Yes. And emotionally taxing? Of course. Is it true you were treated for postpartum depression and anxiety? Yes. Like 1 in 7 mothers. And during that time, did you ever leave Ezra with a neighbor overnight? Yes. Once. I was afraid I would cry in front of him, and I didn't want to scare him. There was a soft gasp from someone in the back row. Chloe. Olivia didn't flinch. Jennings stepped closer. So you'll admit you were emotionally unstable for a time. I'll admit I was human. Jennings smiled. It was the kind of smile men used before pulling a trigger in a courtroom. I'd like to enter Exhibit 48, he said, holding up a stack of papers. Journal entries from Ms. Kessler's personal blog, dating back to college. Posts discussing burnout, isolation, and emotional collapse. Objection, overruled. He read from one entry. Some days, I want to be erased. Just for a moment. Just to not feel like failure has skin. Jennings paused, then looked up. Is this how you felt as a mother? Olivia's voice was a whisper. I wrote that before Ezra was born. But you published it publicly. For anyone to see. Including your son. He can read it when he's older, she said, louder now. He can know what pain looks like. He can know it doesn't make you dangerous. It makes you real. A murmur swept through the jury box. Jennings pressed on. Why now, Ms. Kessler? Why come forward now, if not for revenge? Or publicity? Or compensation? Olivia leaned forward slightly and said, without blinking, because the truth needed time to breathe. Jennings stilled. She continued, softer, but not weaker. I waited because I wanted to protect Ezra. From headlines. From lawyers like you. From a man who once sent me money to disappear. I waited because when you're poor and alone, you don't file lawsuits, you survive. But then my son started asking why he didn't have a father. Why his last name wasn't mine. Why I flinched when he said dad in public. Her voice cracked, then steadied. And I realized I couldn't keep silence in a crib and expect it to grow into safety. So I stopped being quiet. That's why now, the courtroom was still. Even Jennings couldn't speak for a moment. Then he cleared his throat. No further questions. When Olivia stepped down, Chloe stood up and left the courtroom. Not because she was angry, but because she couldn't breathe. She reached the hallway, hands trembling, phone buzzing endlessly in her purse. She leaned against the wall, staring at the floor. Damien had lied. Not once. Not just about Olivia, but about everything that came after. And Chloe, who had told herself she was the lucky one, now realized she was the shield, the distraction, the polished, camera-ready rewrite of a story built on someone else's silence. The next morning, the internet was ablaze. She stayed calm while they tried to break her. I was protecting my child. Courtroom moment. Goes viral. Olivia Kessler's testimony sparks conversation about single motherhood and mental health. The tide had turned, and Olivia? She walked Ezra to school in the crisp morning light, coffee in one hand, his tiny backpack in the other. She bent down before he walked through the gate. "You're strong," she whispered. "You're kind. And you're seen." Ezra smiled. "Even by Daddy?" Olivia paused, then nodded. "Yes," she said quietly. "Even by him. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough." The silence in the penthouse wasn't the peaceful kind. It was the kind that wrapped around Chloe's ribs like a rope. She sat at the marble kitchen island, a folder spread open in front of her, one filled with copies, not originals. Emails, internal memos, contracts bearing her signature, except she'd never signed them. Damien was in his home office, on another press call, spinning damage control. "Unfounded claims," he'd said earlier that morning. "We're respecting the legal process." Chloe closed the folder, walked down the hall, opened the door without knocking. He glanced up. "Chloe, not now." "No, you listen." She dropped the folder on his desk. He paused, stared at it, then looked up slowly. "You've been reading stolen documents." "Don't twist this," she snapped. "You used my name on a joint settlement letter to shut Olivia up. And you did it while we were in Cabo." I checked the timestamps. Damien's voice hardened. "It was handled by legal." "You don't understand." "No, Damien. You don't understand. I was your alibi, your trophy, your puppet." He stood. "Now, this isn't productive." Chloe's voice cracked, but she didn't back down. "You said she ghosted you. You said she was unstable, that she'd faked the pregnancy and vanished." Damien looked at her, eyes cold. "And you believed me." There it was, not regret, not fear, just arrogance. She turned toward the hallway, toward the place where their wedding photos hung. She stared at one, then turned back. "I'm hiring my own attorney." Damien's posture tightened. "Don't be dramatic." "You forged my name," she said quietly. "That's not drama. That's criminal." He laughed, sharp and humorless. "So what now? You testify against me?" Chloe stepped forward and placed a USB drive on his desk. "I already did." Later that night, Chloe sat alone in a hotel room 2 blocks from the courthouse. She stared out the window, phone turned face down, heart in a vice. On the muted TV, they replayed Olivia's testimony, the calm, the composure, the fire, and then a screenshot of the email from Damien Blake to Marcus Holt. Subject: "She won't go away. Erase her from my life. Quietly. Use Chloe's name if needed. I don't care. Just make her disappear." The reporters read it out loud with stunned voices. They didn't have the context, but Chloe did. That was the day she had asked Damien why he was stressed. He'd kissed her forehead and said, "Just business." She'd believed him. She'd believed everything. And now she couldn't stop shaking. The next morning, she walked into the courtroom alone, hair tied back. Simple suit. No statement. No drama. Just truth. She took the stand when called, swore the oath, and looked Damien in the eye for the first time since the collapse. "I never knew about Olivia," she said. "He told me she left him, that she fabricated a pregnancy, that she was unstable." She reached into her purse and pulled out a printout. "I only learned last week that this settlement letter carried my digital signature. I never saw it. Never authorized it. I was on vacation. Damien used me to bury her." Gasps echoed. Even the judge leaned forward slightly. Chloe's voice didn't waver. "And when I confronted him, he didn't deny it. He said, 'You believed me.' Like that made it okay." She turned to the jury. "I believed him because I loved him. But loving someone doesn't make them honest. And silence doesn't make you innocent." Her hands trembled, but her spine did not. "I won't be silent anymore." Back at the defense table, Damien's lips pressed into a flat line. Marcus sat behind him, expression unreadable. Adira smiled just slightly from Olivia's table. And Olivia, she looked at Chloe, not with pity, not with triumph, but with something gentler. A silent acknowledgement between women who'd both been used and who had chosen not to stay broken. The courtroom was quieter than it had been in weeks, not silent, but heavy, like everyone was holding their breath for the inevitable sound of the gavel. Olivia sat upright, Ezra's drawing folded in her coat pocket. She hadn't read the verdict early. She could have. Adira had offered. But Olivia wanted to hear it with the world watching. Not behind closed doors. Not whispered. This time, she wouldn't let justice sneak in. She would make it walk through the front door. Judge Hawthorne looked over his glasses, his voice steady and clear. "This court finds that Mr. Damien Blake knowingly and willfully neglected his parental duties, acted in bad faith in efforts to avoid paternity accountability, and knowingly submitted forged legal documentation for the purpose of silencing Ms. Kessler. Damien didn't blink. He just stared straight ahead like the words were meant for someone else. Full legal and physical custody of Ezra Kessler is hereby awarded to his mother, Olivia Kessler. Damien Blake is to have no visitation at this time. A separate petition for supervised contact may be reviewed in the future at the child's discretion. The air in the room shifted. Then, in addition, the court orders reparations in the form of $1.2 million in back child support, damages for emotional distress, legal fees, and punitive damages related to document falsification. Mr. Blake is further sanctioned for obstruction of justice in a civil matter. The gavel struck once at a sound like a stone dropped in still water, echoing. Final flashes burst as Olivia stepped onto the courthouse steps, holding Ezra's hand. Adira walked beside them, fielding questions from reporters, deflecting them with professional grace. But Olivia didn't speak to the press. She looked straight ahead, eyes shielded by dark sunglasses, Ezra tucked under her arm like a small, beating heart. "Mommy," he whispered, leaning into her. "Yeah, baby? Can we go home now?" She knelt and pulled him close. "We're already there." The reporters kept shouting. "Olivia, any comment on the verdict? Will you be pressing charges for the forged documents? How do you feel?" She turned slightly, voice quiet enough to barely reach the microphones. "We don't need their world," she said. "We're building our own." And then she walked down the courthouse steps, past the chaos, into the future. Chloe didn't show up that day. She was gone. No public statement, no final interview. Her social accounts vanished. Her name disappeared from Blake Enterprises' PR roster. Some said she moved to Lisbon. Others whispered she was working at a women's shelter under an alias no one really knew. And Olivia didn't chase the answer. She didn't need to. Chloe had done her part, stepped out of her role as polished accessory and into her truth. That was enough. Damien's team released a statement the next morning. "While we respect the court's decision, Mr. Blake intends to appeal the custody ruling and remains committed to finding a path forward that includes his son. No further comment." Olivia read it once, then deleted it. That he wanted the image of a father now, not the weight of it, not the years he missed, not the tantrums or the first words or the way Ezra used to cry without sound. That he couldn't appeal his absence. He couldn't rewind the nights Olivia spent rocking Ezra beside a broken heater, whispering stories into darkness. An OPR firm could polish that kind of abandonment. A week later, Olivia stood outside the courthouse again, this time alone. Ezra was at school. She wore jeans, a coat, and no makeup. A quiet victory lap. She looked up at the building's stone steps. How many women had walked them feeling small? How many had been forced to explain their pain in legal terms? She took a deep breath and then turned her back on the building. She wouldn't walk up those stairs again. Not if she could help it. Not if she could build something stronger, from scratch. That night, she tucked Ezra into bed. He was older now, not by age, by experience. He looked at her and asked the same question he always did after brushing his teeth. "Will you stay right here?" And she always gave the same answer. Always. He smiled, half asleep, curls pressed into his pillow. "Even if the world gets loud again?" She kissed his forehead. "Then we'll whisper to each other." And just like that, the war was over. Not the grief, not the memories, but the silence. That was gone, forever. The community center smelled of lemonade, old wood, and hope. Balloons lined the windows. Folding chairs faced a small stage where a crooked podium leaned gently to the left. A table in the back held name tags, juice boxes, and warm brownies from someone's grandmother. IT wasn't glamorous, IT was real, and Olivia had never felt more at home. Outside, the sun slanted through high windows, casting soft gold across the heads of single mothers, their kids, social workers, and allies, people who had survived fire without ever getting credit for it. Ezra was in the back corner, building a tower of paper cups with another child. His laugh cracked the air like sunlight through glass. She exhaled, then stepped up to the mic. The room quieted. Her voice, when it came, was calm, certain, no tremble. "I used to think survival was enough. That if I kept my head down and worked hard, life would eventually leave me alone. That maybe pain would forget I existed. She looked around the room, but I learned something. Pain doesn't forget. And silence isn't safety. Silence is just another kind of cage. Someone in the crowd nodded. Another wiped a tear. When I had my son, I wasn't given celebration. I was given a settlement offer and a warning to disappear. I was told, without words, that I didn't belong in the world of the powerful, that my motherhood was inconvenient, that my love was unmarketable. She paused, and for a while, I believed them. Eyes welled across the room. But then, my son smiled at me, and I realized his joy doesn't need permission. His existence doesn't need validation, and neither does mine. Applause broke out, soft at first, then swelling. Olivia smiled. But this isn't just about me. It's about all of us who were told we were too emotional, too angry, too much, too loud. We're not. We were never too much. We were just awake. She looked toward Ezra, who gave her a tiny thumbs up from his cup tower. We heal, she said, voice stronger now. We rise, and we never return to the fire that burned us. The applause rose again, louder, freer, but Olivia's gaze shifted toward the back of the room. And there he was, Damien, not in a suit, not surrounded by handlers or flashing lights, just a man in a gray coat, alone in the back row at a shadow of the person he once made the world believe he was. His eyes met hers. He didn't smile, didn't wave. He just stood there, like a child caught watching through a window. After the applause faded and the event began to scatter, he moved forward, slow, unsure. Ezra had already run off to the hallway with his friend. Olivia, Damien said softly. She didn't flinch, didn't step back, but she didn't welcome him, either. Why are you here? His voice cracked. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything. No, she said. It doesn't. A beat passed out. He nodded. Looked down. Every day I wake up wondering what I missed, what I destroyed. She didn't answer that. She wasn't here to comfort him. I thought showing up mattered, he said. Being here, seeing him. You missed your chance to see him when he needed you. Olivia replied, calm but final. Now, he's not a symbol. He's not a headline. He's a boy who laughs at bad knock-knock jokes and asks for pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. And you are a stranger to him. Damien's shoulders sagged. Can I someday? She looked at him, truly looked, and felt something unexpected. Pity. Not for him, for the man he could have been. The father he never dared to try being. That's not my choice, she said. It'll be his. And he's not ready. He nodded. Again, silence stretched between them. He turned to go, but before he disappeared into the crowd, she added, I meant what I said up there. He paused. We don't return to the fire that burned us. And with that, she walked past him, toward the hallway where her son was laughing. Outside, the air was crisp. Olivia stepped into it with a lightness she hadn't felt in years. Ezra ran up to her, tugging her hand. Did you see my tower? I did. I think it was taller than me. She laughed. It definitely was. They walked toward the parking lot, his small fingers wrapped in hers. Mom? Yeah. That man in the gray coat. He looked at me weird. She stopped, looked down. That was someone from before, she said gently. But we're not going backwards. Ezra tilted his head. Okay. He didn't ask for more, didn't need the story yet. She knew one day he would. And when that day came, she'd tell it all. But today wasn't for stories. It was for peace, for futures built from ash, not haunted by it, for healing, for rising, and for never, ever going back.